Happy to be joined now by ESPN NFL Draft analyst and insider Matt Miller, joining us here on the show, and recently put together with his colleague Jordan Reed, best fit, best value at just about every pick in the first round. And we'll dive into that in short order. But Matt, first, thanks for giving us some time. When you get to draft week, is it like Christmas for you? What is this week like?
It's like Christmas when you're a parent, you know that stress of making sure everything's done. You're
Right.
staying up super late, putting bicycles together and Barbie dream houses, and you're worried you forgot something. So it's like Christmas once you've had kids, but Thursday, it's really a culmination of a year of work that we get to see, over those 3 days. It's a ton of fun, and then the process rolls right over. Next week I'll be writing about the 2025 NFL draft. So it never truly stops, but it's a long week, guys, but it is a great week. And it's so fun to get to hop on with you guys and break down each individual team, whether it be with you guys or the other places I get the advantage of talking to this week.
So you get in this mode of where you get this stuff all put together, and we talk about it here on our show. You do nothing but get ready for this thing, and then Roger Goodell steps up and he starts to read, and with that first card, and we all realize that we really don't know exactly what's going to happen. But what does your gut tell you about what may be the surprises in this draft, particularly at the very top?
Yeah, I think we know what will happen at the top. I feel good about that since the Chicago Bears brought in exactly one player at the quarterback position in the pre-draft process. That was Caleb Williams. So feel pretty good about that one. But you're right, Steve. After that, you're waiting. And I think this year there is that added level of intrigue. Who will that number 2 pick be by the Washington Commanders? We know it will be a quarterback. Will it be Jaden Daniels, the Heisman Trophy winner from LSU? Will they go for the upside of a Drake May from North Carolina? Will they go for somebody who has risen as much as any player in this pre-draft process in J.J. McCarthy of Michigan? So the Commanders certainly have options at the quarterback spot. And to me, that's the first domino that's going to fall, guys, because what Washington does at 2 will inform what New England can do at 3, what options they have, whether that be stick and pick and take a quarterback, whether that be trading out and letting a team like the Minnesota Vikings or the Denver Broncos come up. So I know that maybe people think I have an obligation to sell the intrigue that is the NFL draft, but this year it really sells itself because we truly don't know what's going to happen at pick number 2 overall.
Yeah. And just as a reminder for everybody out there, Matt will be a part of ESPN's Day 3 broadcast on Saturday at noon Eastern Time, which will be airing on ESPN and ABC. So as I mentioned, you recently, along with Jordan Reed, your colleague, put together kind of best fit, best value at every pick in round 1, and he went Xavier Worthy for fit at 28 for the Bills. You went with another receiver for best value. Tell us why and who.
Yeah, the best value here. Best value, again, you're looking at who's available on the clock as opposed to where they're ranked, right? So it's not necessarily a true, hey, this is our need, this is the fit, but it's looking at my big board. And so I believe, I don't have it in front of me, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, it was Adonai Mitchell from Texas, I believe is who the pick was. It's been
That's
a long
right.
week since we did that exercise, so I'm glad I remembered. Mitchell is a big play waiting to happen. We saw that in his 5 career college football playoff games, 5 touchdown catches. I had a scouting director tell me, if you just watched his tape against Alabama, you would think this is one of the best receivers in the class because when he was with Georgia and when he was with Texas, he absolutely beat up Nick Saban's secondary. That makes me feel pretty good about a prospect when you can go at what I consider to be the best defensive backs coach of all time in Nick Saban. When you can go at his secondary, you're going to have a ton of success in the NFL if you had that production. 6'3", 205 pounds. He is a speedster, 4.35, 40-yard dash to the NFL scouting combine. And I think he's an ascending prospect. There were times where, Texas leaned on the run with Jonathan Brooks, certainly early in the year. There were times where their quarterback, Quinn Ewers, struggled to connect on the deep ball. We saw Quinn struggle through some injuries this year. That certainly affected the deep ball, and that is what Mitchell does best. So to me, he's a player that's just scratching the surface of what he can be. And now that you have a Bills depth chart without Gabe Davis and without Stephon Diggs, I think this is an opportunity to kind of combine those 2 players into one, where you get the deep threat of a Gabe Davis, but you get the sure-handedness. You get that go-to factor of Stephon Diggs. Mitchell had 1 drop last year in college, which is phenomenal considering the types of targets that he actually saw in this Texas offense. So I think the sky's the limit for him. He's a really, really good player that would immediately benefit this offense.
We heard, that Mitchell is dealing with type 1 diabetes, or has. He's a type 1 diabetic. And we've also heard news that Brian Thomas has a torn labrum. When you get late news like that, although I would imagine the medical revealed the type 1 diabetes for Mitchell to all the teams at the Combine, does that impact their draft stock? Could those guys slide at all in round one? And if so, how much with those kinds of maladies?
I think, and I'll say that information did come out around the time of the Combine, at least on Adonai Mitchell. Now on Brian Thomas, I guess it was about 2 weeks ago when I got a text from someone that said, hey, there's a shoulder issue here. They weren't certain what it was, but I know that information has since come out. I think with Mitchell, you're looking at a situation where you got to talk to the coaches, particularly the strength coaches. How did he manage it? How much did it affect him? I never saw it affect him during the games. And I think that would be one of the questions as you have a player that's learning how to manage that disease, learning how to handle it, what's best for him. I know there were some anonymous reports about maybe he was kind of cantankerous at times. Hey, I get the same way if I skip breakfast. So I definitely can relate to that aspect of it. But I don't know that we'll see a gigantic drop from either guy. It may affect them, instead of going 17, you might go 23 or 24, something like that. But I don't see a significant drop for either player just based on my conversations with teams around the league right now.
What player might sneak into the first round who maybe didn't start out there?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't start out there. Quinyon Mitchell, he's definitely the player that has pushed himself, the corner from Toledo, who had that great Senior Bowl process, then a great Combine performance. He has pushed himself into that range. If we want to go back to, January 1st until now, he's certainly someone that has pushed his way up the board, probably more than any player other than J.J. McCarthy in this pre-draft process. Now, a couple guys that I think could be on the fringe of making it, Darius Robinson from Missouri, another player. I've gone back and looked at my Senior Bowl notes. Before the Senior Bowl, I thought, here's the top 50 player. After the Senior Bowl, after talking to coaches in the SEC, after his pro day, I think Darius Robinson has pushed himself into the top 32. So I look at two players, if we could flash back 4 months ago, that probably weren't being talked about a ton, especially Quinyon Mitchell. He feels like a lock as a top 20 pick. I think Darius Robinson will be a top 30 pick. Both players have helped themselves tremendously just throughout the process that is the pre-draft.
Matt, Brandon Beane, general manager for the Bills, spoke to the media last week, kind of in his pre-draft press conference. And one of the interesting things he said was he feels that there is a smaller drop in terms of quality of talent on the board from the end of round one to the top of round two than from the top of round two to the bottom of round two. What kind of merits do you think that gives someone like some team like the Bills, who, if they don't like the value at 28, might try to back up and get out if the difference between player 28 and player 38 isn't all that much?
Yeah, I would agree with that, actually. In the process of doing my final rankings, where I put a grade on 474 players. You can find that on ESPN.com. That was something that I actually found, Chris, was that, player 25 and player 40 might not be that different this year. And I would say that carries on through the draft, where we have kind of these big, deep tiers of players. So I think for Buffalo, that's great news. Something that your rival, the Kansas City Chiefs, did several years ago was they traded out of the late first round and still got Chris Jones at the top of the second round. That extra value helped them in building this dynasty that they have now. It also does help to hit on that player at the top of the second round. So I think for the Bills, you look at scenarios where if the talent is wiped out, if you're sitting at 28 and you say, hey, our receiver targets, we wanted to trade up, we couldn't, that board's been wiped out, great opportunity to trade back. The other side of that would be if you get to 28 and you still have 6 or 7 guys on your board that you really like, then you feel confident that you could move back. But I will say this, it's specific to Buffalo. You have to look at so many teams right there with you as being in the same area of need that you're in. We know that Kansas City wants to get a wide receiver. San Francisco could be after a wide receiver. You cannot rule out the Detroit Lions at wide receiver. And then at the top of round two, you have the Carolina Panthers sitting right there at 33. You have the New England Patriots sitting right there. There are so many wide receiver needy teams. And I think that's where with Buffalo, you have to be somewhat conservative, because when everyone in the league knows what your perceived top need is, pretty easy to get jumped. We saw that happen to the New York Jets last year. Everyone knows they need a left tackle. All the left tackles are wiped out except Broderick Jones. And then here come the Pittsburgh Steelers jumping them to get him. So you have to be a little more conservative. Sure, you would love to trade back and get that extra value, but and I know Brandon's very, very smart about this. You have to be aware of what's left on the board and understanding how far back you can actually slide before your board gets wiped out completely.
Last one, Matt. You know, this is a kind of time of year where you hear all the GMs talking to their local medias, and you can't believe any of it. But you hear some stuff, and there's been some stuff over there, like, you know, Marvin Harrison Jr. has been one of the top players in this draft from the jump. But now you're talking about guys like Malik Nabers, who may jump him, and other teams are interested in that. Is there any truth to the rumors where some of these guys flip-flop? I know the quarterbacks will flip-flop back and forth. What about Malik Nabers and Marvin Harrison Jr., and how close in are they in their respective tier?
Yeah, Steve, that's something I was hearing back even at the Senior Bowl. Excuse me. My suspicion is we're hearing the Malik Nabers talk from 30 NFL teams that are not the Chicago Bears and Arizona Cardinals, because those are the only two teams that Marvin Harrison Jr. met with on a top 30 visit in the entire pre-draft process. Now, he had meetings with 9 teams at the NFL Scouting Combine. I have a suspicion we're looking at a lot of teams right now that say, we're not going to be able to get Marvin Harrison Jr. anyway. The next guy on the list looks pretty darn good to us. This happened back in 2021 when everyone knew Trevor Lawrence was here in first overall. You'd start the area NFL team say, you know, we like Zach Wilson just as much as we like Trevor Lawrence. And then when it was assumed that Zach would go too, you start hearing, well, we like Trey Lance and Justin Fields as much as those guys. So there's definitely, I think, an eye toward, hey, we're never going to have the opportunity to get that player. That is no slight to Malik Nabers at all. He's a fantastic prospect, amazing speed. What he does after the catch is phenomenal. He deserves to be a top 5 or top 6 selection in this class. But I think it's far and away that Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best receiver in this class. You can make an argument he's the best overall prospect in this class from an NFL readiness standpoint, from a trait standpoint. You know what you're getting in the pedigree with his dad being an NFL Hall of Famer. So he is as clean as they come when we're looking at wide receivers.
Matt, thanks very much for the time. We appreciate it. Enjoy the draft, especially day 3. We'll look for you on ESPN and ABC.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.